essentially every time Godzilla shows up, things get worse. You know, people get more and more scared, and eventually he makes landfall.
The military fires off machine guns at the creature, and people start to evacuate the city and block off the bridges.
And when he makes landfall, he kind of just trashes this harbor area, like power station looking area. Just kind of stomps around in it for a little bit.
Obviously, there are a lot of great moments in here as far as getting to see Godzilla in action.
What is not cut, for the most part, are the real reasons that people are still watching this movie and these movies today. The scenes featuring Armand Starr, if you'll forgive a very bad and overused pun.
The professor urges the military to not use lights on Godzilla because it'll trigger him. Which I didn't realize was actually foreshadowing, because there's a scene where a bunch of journalists are taking photos of Godzilla and it like catches his attention and he goes and like literally like chomps on the tower.
Some of the overacting was fantastic, but anytime that Godzilla is destroying the tiny buildings is great.
The Godzilla stuff, as far as special effects go, Godzilla looked okay.
Going on a tangent here, I think a lot of people will probably be talking about the special effect work in the movie. And since obviously this podcast has to deal with both Godzilla and King Kong, there's going to be some like, you know, what are the movies saying to each other before finally Godzilla versus King Kong comes up. And it's the third Godzilla movie. And the thing is, if you are comparing the two films, the original Godzilla movie and the original King Kong movie, then obviously the one with the better special effects and surprisingly the much older film, King Kong, is the one that ages better.
Yeah, I mean, the stomping around the city and stuff.
So Godzilla up some power lines and then stomps on a train. Oh, that scene's disturbing. If that's not enough, he then starts eating the train like it's a piece of sausage.
My favorite moment in the movie is just the image of Godzilla with the train in his mouth. I know that's at this point almost a stock image that's used to represent the series, but man, it's still so effective, and it just shows kind of his animalistic nature. It's almost like a cat just playing around with whatever it can find, and I really, really love that image.
He tears apart a whole goddamn bridge just for the hell of it before getting bored and just off.
And then goes back into the water, kind of satisfied that he's made his presence felt.
You know what it is? Godzilla to me didn't feel like a kaiju movie because humanity never really did anything to fight back with any effectiveness until the very end, which was just dumb. Instead, this felt like a natural disaster movie, which I guess is probably kind of what it was going for. It felt like humanity just completely failing to be able to contend with something that nature threw at them, like watching Twister or something along those lines. I've never seen Twister. Why did I use Twister as a point of comparison?
Now he's making his way toward the city's main line of defense. 300,000 volts of electricity strung around the city as a barrier. A barrier against Godzilla.
I loved the build-up to Godzilla attacking Tokyo. Though I'm pretty sure they couldn't exactly evacuate Tokyo totally, especially now.
The Japanese construct a massive electric fence overnight to try and stop Godzilla in his tracks. The professor is super upset about everyone wanting to kill Godzilla, you know, despite him rampaging across the country and killing thousands of people and completely demolishing their livelihoods.
But then you also understand it from Ogata's point of view, where he's like, we have to destroy him, because what is he going to do? He's just going to keep destroying the cities again and again, and then all that chaos and all that destruction, is it worth the study? So it's a very interesting balance of conflict there, and I've always found it fascinating.
I love all the shots of soldiers, tanks, and artillery as Godzilla approaches.
I love them rolling up the artillery to the harbor, setting up the electrical cables. They had the F-86F Sabres. It was great.
So then the military starts getting heavily involved. So the next time he shows up, they've set up this giant razor wire fence area, and they're running electricity through it.
You don't even realize just how matched they are.
They all stuck to trying to kill Godzilla, but it looked fun.
When he crosses the line for the area, they start shocking him and shooting the living shit out of him with all kinds of armaments and guns and everything.
Just remember, the power lines Godzilla destroys around Japan are each approximately 400 feet tall.
I think the coolest moment, especially from a special effects standpoint in the original Godzilla film, as far as spectacle is concerned, right? But it's gotta be him melting down the power lines.
Godzilla, of course, makes quick work of the electric wires and then melts them with his atomic breath before lighting the city on fire.
And in retaliation, he literally just melts everything holding the tower up, or the fence up. He doesn't give two shits about the gunfire.
It's an effect that looks cool to today, and you don't know how they do it to today unless you read up on it. Of course, they were made of wax, and they put like I don't know if it was like they put heat on it of some kind and made it melt like that, and it glowed in camera, and it was a black and white photography, so it just worked really well. But that is a fantastic sequence right there, and I think that is the coolest moment in the movie.
Honestly, seeing Godzilla at a distance is fine. Seeing him repair buildings, destroy tiny homes, that's all well and dandy, but those big-ass eyes looking at you is laughable.
You can tell it's a guy in a suit, although the original Godzilla covers it up by, everything being at night. They stopped caring about covering it up in later Godzilla films, obviously.
And he just starts wrecking house. I mean, he's knocking over stuff right and left. He's burning things.
Lots of fire and destruction ensues.
Godzilla just comes into Tokyo and destroys everything.
Godzilla just tears through the town with no f***s to give.
He sets the whole island on fire, or the whole harbor on fire. Like, he's unstoppable. They can't do anything to stop him.
Most of the special effects looked fine. They didn't look like better enough for how much later this was than King Kong.
Godzilla was originally planned to be, or they wanted it to be, a stop-motion animated film. The filmmakers had seen Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which it might have been Willis O'Brien, but I think it was Ray Harryhausen who did the special effects on that one. Don't quote me, look it up. And they wanted to have that same kind of special effects work there for Godzilla. Now, there's only, I believe, one shot in Godzilla that has stop motion animation.
I think I actually like the special effects work in King Kong more, maybe even a lot more than I like the special effects work in Godzilla.
But they needed a movie done quickly, and they needed a movie done more cheaply than it would have taken to have the same stop motion animated effects that Willis O'Brien had created for the original King Kong, for that to be part of the process in making Godzilla. So they made up their own thing, which, to be fair to them, lasted forever. It actually lasted past this technique of suitmation, quote unquote, because it's not really animation. But, scale models, a guy in a suit being a giant monster or a robot in later iterations or Power Rangers or whatever the hell. That technique, despite it not looking as good.
Even in this Americanized version of the film, the power, terror, and poignancy of Godzilla's appearance is intact.
It invokes an emotion in you. And that's what a good movie should do, is invoke that kind of emotion and that empathy.
One of the points I always like to make is 9 years prior, there was no way Japan could take this kind of loss from anything in existence. They were a nation blessed by the gods and had conquered a ridiculous amount of Asia. The firebombing, nukes, and new democracy opened their eyes to a very new world. This graphic scenery was hitting some very touchy subjects.
There's an amazing shot here where Godzilla is just in silhouette above the burning city as tanks fire shells at him to no avail.
He's just making a beeline towards more and more highly concentrated populations and leaving nothing behind. I mean, just flat, destroyed Earth.
He just comes in knocking over buildings left and right.
But everything in the movie, the action, the chaos, everything that's kind of going on, it's gripping.
Also, every time he's destroying something, people are standing around 4 blocks away watching. Not running away, not screaming, just watching. That seems so dumb.
But the weakest point for the special effects has got to be when there's some guys in a fire truck, I think, driving down the street, and they're clearly driving on a projected screen behind them, like they're not actually driving. That's fine. That part's fine. The bad part is then when there's just a toy fire truck that crashes, and it is the worst looking shot of, it's clearly a toy. There's nothing about it that sells it. It's just somebody knocked a toy over.
I think the scenes at nighttime work a lot better with Godzilla in that film to kind of add to the horror of it. Otherwise, he's not a very horrific looking monster, in all honesty.
But even though the special effect technique was inferior, for sure. I don't think there's really any good argument against that. You know, there was the Ray Harryhausen special effects movies, and then there were the Japanese special effects movies that were going, you know, back and forth for many decades, right? And Ray Harryhausen, of course, came from the school of Willis O'Brien, who made the effects for King Kong. There's just no comparison. The King Kong effects age better than the Godzilla effects do. And both of them were used heavily up until CGI came into play in the late 80s, early 90s. But then, even past that, the stop motion kind of died out, right? With Go Motion being the last vestiges in the 1980s doing the blur effect, Go Motion effects. That was the last bit of stop motion I think probably is in The Abyss, the James Cameron film. There's a little bit of stop motion in there. But, you know, once you get those CGI effects making all that smooth motion, you know, you got to move on. You got to make movies that look better than that. But the suitmation actually stayed around in Japanese television well past that, which is pretty impressive in its own way, in its own right. So, I don't know. I think we can appreciate both styles of filmmaking. Both Godzilla and King Kong are both giant monster movies, but they are different kinds of giant monster movies, with King Kong being more the adventure, Lost World sort of thing, while Godzilla is the nuclear holocaust, metaphorical, anti-war horror movie. So they both use their monsters in different ways. There's a whole lot of, you know, all these early Willis O'Brien, Ray Harryhausen, and of course these early kaiju films. They're all having a similar conversation with each other if you're watching them somewhat in order. It's really interesting to do as a viewer.
The Japanese version here is very dark.
I think there are two really powerful moments in the movie.
Especially, there was a real two moments in the entire movie that broke my heart. Is there was a woman holding her children as he was, you know, like the big invasion when he really came to shore and was just smashing through.
On the horror side of things, with Godzilla doing damage to the city, is when the mother is with her children.
And my favorite line in the movie, it's a bit of a dark one, but it's the scene where Godzilla's rampaging through Tokyo, and it's a mother who's trying to take care of her children and put their minds at ease as they're about to be stomped on by Godzilla, and she holds her children close and says, "We're going to join Daddy. We'll be where Daddy is soon."
There's a moment where a mother huddles with her children, basically saying, "We'll be with your father soon in heaven."
And she's saying they're going to be joining their father soon.
And she says, children, we're going to go be with Daddy now. And it's just like, oh my God.
Man, I hate to poke fun at that moment, but is the first time I saw the uncut version of the film, I was probably in my late teens, and I was just so taken aback by that. I had no idea that that the movie got that dark.
That is some powerful stuff right there.
It really kind of hits you hard, understanding that, you know, what these people are going through, because in all the others, it's just like building smash, building smash, building smash. And we never think of the people outside of the people just looking onward from a distance.
So to hear this mother telling her children that they're going to die and that they need to just accept it, and there's actually an upside to it. They'll see their dad, who had probably died during the war, and they'll be with him shortly. It's just...
But this was somebody there with her children and expressing concern and fear, and it's heartbreaking.
Wow, it's a profoundly dark moment in the series.
Really scary and horrifying and sad and all that.
The visual effects masterminded by Eiji Tsuburaya, a personal hero of mine, give us a number of iconic and meaning-laden images.
And it's, again, just becoming more and more like, obvious that the Japanese government and soldiers and everything are just woefully outmatched.
Now in the 56 version, we've cycled back to the beginning of the film, present time. But it's hella confusing because all of the setup scenes are clearly identical, but Steve is wearing completely different clothing and looks much more battered than he did at the beginning of the film. That and an Ogata stand-in keeps popping in and out of scenes all willy-nilly. This is the weakest scene in the edit.
Raymond Burr / Steve Martin was a worthless person, offering nothing besides narration.
The unbelievable is happening before our eyes. Godzilla leaving behind a sea of flame.
I can hardly believe what has just happened. Now it seems Tokyo has no defense.
My favorite line from Godzilla 1954. Ooh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that one.
Two that always resonate with me are Godzilla, framed through a window behind a birdcage, as if he's also imprisoned within it.
There's some cool shots where you see Godzilla's tail through the windows of a wrecked building. The reporter keeps broadcasting as Godzilla comes right for them.
Furthermore, at the end, after they actually show the devastation after the fact, there's a little girl staring at her mom who, in my opinion, is dead, even though they kind of say something a little later on that kind of indicates that maybe she's not. But, oh my God, I mean, the child just starts crying and you're sitting there thinking about that, and she can't be the only one. There's so many other people, but she is representing the people of Japan and the pain they're going through in that moment. And it brings me to tears when I watch that, just hearing her cry. It's terrible.
Honestly, sending an American to Japan that doesn't speak Japanese doesn't really make that much sense. Hell, this movie takes place in 1956. Martin is what, 40? 50? He would have fought in the war anyway. I'm sure there was people who served that speak the language. That's why it doesn't make sense that Burr basically kidnapped the security officer from the airport. Like, doesn't that man have a job? You know, have a translator that would get you a tent to go sleep on some random island, but, I mean, people are just walking through security now with guns and knives and stuff.
Now, by the end of it, Serizawa knows what he has to do because it's that responsibility, a responsibility he didn't even ask for, if you think about it, because just because he had this weapon, I mean, what if he didn't have it? I mean, then what are they going to do? Then Godzilla's just going to smash everything up.
The method that they actually defeat him with is kind of silly.
Emiko tells Ogata about Dr. Serizawa's secret weapon.
And of course, the memorable weapon that's introduced in that movie is the oxygen destroyer.
You know what? I'm going to take that back. It's really silly. It's an oxygen destroyer that this scientist had discovered on accident.
But he has this weapon or this device that could be weaponized, depending on how you look at it.
And he refuses to let it be used because it could be used as a weapon of mass destruction.
He has created this weapon, the oxygen destroyer. He has created something that is equally as dangerous as all of those weapons. And he knows the responsibility that goes with it because he's seen what those things can do. He knows what his weapon can do.
And he does not want that to be released into the world with being something that he discovered.
Which is meant to just be the atomic bomb version 2.0, essentially.
So as the destruction gets worse and worse and Godzilla keeps killing people, his assistant kind of just blabs about his secret discovery, and she and the guy she talks to go to confront him. And
we flash back to the scene in the fish tank.
We get a flashback scene where Serizawa shows Emiko the oxygen destroyer, and she explains to Steve how it works in detail, which is weird. Maybe she's actually a scientist.
BT dubs, I love Serizawa's lab. It's complete with beakers and Tesla coils. It's great.
In the end, he's distraught about it because he knows that no matter what, that if he does this, if he develops this weapon and he saves the people of Japan, if he destroys Godzilla, they're going to want it again. It's a matter of fact.
His device could turn all of Tokyo Bay into a graveyard.
And you can actually see it in that scene. I think even Emiko knows that when he decides and makes that decision that he's going to do this.
The oxygen destroyer was basically pseudoscience.
Emiko says, but what if it falls in the wrong hands? Which seems like a good metaphor for the atomic bomb.
I'm still not sure how it actually works. Plus, if they dumped it in the ocean, wouldn't it create a chain reaction?
He's adamant he's not going to let this discovery out. He's not going to let this weapon become part of the world.
Dr. Serizawa argues that if they use the weapon against Godzilla, his discovery could fall into the wrong hands and doom the world.
And he fights with the other guy and smacks his head around, and everything looks like, I will die to keep this secret.
We see the destruction of Tokyo as children sing for hope for the future on TV, which convinces Serizawa to help stop the monster once and for all.
Because that was also a very powerful scene, is the choir singing, lamenting about the death and destruction of the people who they lost. And that's what got to him,
And then the radio plays a song of a bunch of young students singing about how sad they are and how they want peace. And he's like, all right, okay.
Serizawa destroys his research in a fire.
So he understands the responsibility he has, but he knows that he cannot let anyone else have that. So he takes it upon himself. And you can tell that Emiko, she sees it. She knows what he means when he's burning the notes and everything. It's like, this will be the one and only time that I do it. But she knows what that means.
And they really do a good job of bookending the Showa series, starting with 1954's Gojira and going to the end of the Heisei series with Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, which really reintroduces the oxygen destroyer as a monster that Godzilla has to fight. So they bring back some of the characters from the original movie, and I really think that's a significant decision that they made. It works really well for the then finale of the Godzilla series, and we all know that he continued making those movies afterwards.
We cut to a boat on the ocean where we're told that they're using Geiger counters to pinpoint Godzilla's location.
So, they pretty cleverly use a Geiger counter apparently Godzilla sleeps during the day is what it seems to be. So they use a Geiger counter to sail out into the Tokyo Bay to find where he's sleeping.
I love the upbeat music here. It's such a change in tone. It's like Whiplash.
So it leads to one of the most memorably tragic endings in a Godzilla movie, both because of what happens to Dr. Serizawa and because of what happens to Godzilla. It's just a really effective tearjerker of an ending.
Ogata demands to go with Serizawa. The two of them suit up in a pair of old-school diving suits.
And they send the two scientists down in these ratchet-ass, janky diving suits. I mean, I know it's the 50s, but Jesus, these things are like fourth hand, holes in them and everything. They're old-timey diving suits, like the metal helmets that are weighted down so you sink, and the hose going up to the boat for air.
They descend to the ocean floor to plant the oxygen destroyer where Godzilla slumbers.
So they sink down to the bottom, and Godzilla kind of he's sleeping on his side on the floor of the ocean. He kind of looks over his shoulder like, huh? No, alright, whatever.
And Godzilla again, moments before his death, simply walking peacefully along the seafloor in Tokyo Bay.
You see that even Ogata, I'm sure he has this, and he's even trying to attempt it after the fact when they actually are trying to go down into the ocean to release the device. You can see he's trying to protect him. Like, he doesn't want anything to happen to her because he knows that he's important to Emiko, but they don't want him to die.
For the remainder of the movie, a lot of the more somber moments really fall flat.
Once they've confirmed his location or whatever, the eye patch doctor tells the other one to go up and then releases his weapon.
Serizawa doesn't have much dialogue or any real screen time, and because many of these scenes are cut and dialogue altered, I kinda don't care about his death as much. In 54, this is still a really touching scene to me.
And it's literally just, it's so silly. It's just bubbles. It's just bubbles.
But unfortunately, they didn't handle the oxygen destroyer so well in its last appearance in the second Godzilla King of the Monsters from a couple years ago. I think they didn't need to introduce that weapon again. They just have the military come up with it, and they use it really quickly against Ghidorah. It doesn't do anything. It's just mishandled entirely, I think. But that being said, it's extremely pivotal to the series, and it's a very important part of the original movie.
And, of course, the final scene of the film, which is immensely powerful.
Serizawa ultimately forces Ogata to leave and sets off the device.
But he knows he has to. And that's also heartbreaking, is knowing that you have this responsibility, you have the means to save the world.
The water starts to boil around him.
And it immediately starts messing with Godzilla, but the dude's fine. Like, he's just fine, just hanging out.
Of course, I talked about Dr. Serizawa's sacrifice, grounding the whole picture. That's an amazing moment, dramatically.
I mean, obviously he doesn't survive, but we don't see him die. He's just standing there watching. As Godzilla's like rolling around in what's supposed to be underwater, just like, ah!
Serizawa says it worked, and then radios in farewell before cutting his line.
It's heartbreaking as well.
And it's literally he's being killed by bubbles. It's pretty silly. Godzilla breaches the surface to scream like, no!
Godzilla breaches the surface.
And then he sinks to the bottom and dies.
Howling in pain before disappearing and disintegrating into a giant skeleton.
And then very quickly turns into bones, and then nothing.
These images emphasize an uncomfortable truth. Godzilla is our victim as much as we are his.
So yeah, that's how he dies. I had kind of forgotten about that. It's pretty stupid.
The professor looks way more upset about Godzilla dying than Serizawa. In the Japanese version, the professor actually monologues to himself and the audience that if we keep nuclear testing, we could see another Godzilla again.
And it ends just as quickly as King Kong does. Steve Martin says something about the world being able to go on to live another day, and the screen goes black. Get out of the theater.
And so, yeah, that's the original movie.
I could talk all day about this film.
Still in my top 3 of all Godzilla movies.
The movie as a whole is pretty awesome.
This movie is very heartbreaking. It's a shame that it gets viewed under such a narrow lens that it's nothing more than just a cheesy monster movie.
Along with probably Shin Godzilla, which is very important in its own way, but I won't talk about that until later. And also Mothra vs. Godzilla is my favorite in the series, as I said earlier.
I do realize that Godzilla did go on to become the cheesy monster movies that everyone knows and assumes that they all are. But Gojira, Godzilla, whatever you want to call it, from 1954, the original version, is so much more than a typical monster movie.
So yeah, that was Godzilla. Meh.
Godzilla holds up really well in a lot of places, and in others not so much.
Is fine.
I hope other people are able to appreciate the original Godzilla film. I wasn't on for the last episode for King Kong, but I also think that's another great film. I think there are 4 great capital G giant monster films, and both the original King Kong and the original Godzilla movie are those. The other 2 being Spielberg films, Jaws and Jurassic Park, I believe, brought the giant monster movies back much later with that same sort of eye-on quality that the monster movies in between, they're great for their own reasons, but those 4 movies, I believe, for me, kind of like are above the rest.
The Americanized version of it is a typical monster movie. They remove all of these important elements and understanding what Godzilla is in context to the story. And now it becomes about an American journalist who just happened to be there. From his point of view, sure, that's what it could be. But from the point of view of the important characters, that's what makes this movie shine.
Man, I can't stress how much I enjoy the plot of that movie, both with the human drama and with what's going on with Godzilla.
The mad scientist Dr. Serizawa was just an overactor, who for some reason killed himself at the end of the film, after burning his notes how to create the oxygen destroyer. It doesn't make sense. It was dumb. I guess it makes more sense if it's the Japanese version, great power, great responsibility, but... ugh.
I mean, I don't think it was even fine. I didn't like this one very much.
It's 67 years old at this point, so it's definitely not going to look as slick as some of the newer stuff would. Doesn't look any worse than a lot of the stuff that came in the preceding decades, or proceeding decades, I should say.
So it's interesting, these genre makers, because King Kong, of course, coupled with The Lost World, created its own giant monster movie genre, and then Godzilla made, the Japanese version, which stemmed off into a million different things. Like I said, those tokusatsu films, the Ultramans, the Power Rangers, all that come from kind of the Godzilla side of things. They're both like genre spawning pictures, and these genre spawning pictures, remember, they're the first of their kind. They haven't yet created a whole bunch of like cliches and are playing within their own thing. They are good movies on their own that were so good that they created a wave. They created a ripple effect that's going up until today.
But, like I said, the black and white creates an atmosphere, and when he's attacking cities at night, it actually looks really cool, where he's all wet and everything. I mean, at times it looks, like his feet is very clearly these big floppy, goofy shoes. And a lot of the miniatures are very clearly miniatures, but there's a really nice job, I think, of mixing miniature shots in with not miniature shots. And for the most part, you can tell, but every now and then they sneak one or two shots in where you're like, was that? I'm not certain that was a miniature or not.
And I will never, ever call it a typical monster movie because it is far from it.
Nothing about this really held my interest.
The first Godzilla film definitely deals with a lot of stuff that you would never expect as like a normal person, having been exposed to Godzilla as a pop icon. It deals with a lot of things you would never expect in that movie, and I think that it gets better and better with each rewatch. And I suggest anybody who didn't get the movie the first time, give it another go and see how you feel about it, and give it a go with King of the Monsters as well. I think you'll be able to appreciate it, and read up on the movie too. It helps as well.
Except for Raymond Burr, looking confused and concerned, just wondering what the heck's going on.
Raymond Burr would later reprise his role as Steve Martin in the Americanized version of 1984's The Return of Godzilla, which was actually a direct sequel to this original movie. Although that version of the movie made the Russians out to be the bad guys, the film still retains its anti-nuclear message thanks to the insistence of Raymond Burr himself. Unfortunately, the Raymond Burr version of Godzilla 85 is only available on VHS, officially. However, if you do find a VHS copy of Godzilla 85 and a working VCR, the movie includes a pretty awesome animated short called Godzilla vs. Bambi. Definitely worth checking out.
Oh, Raymond Burr also smoked enough cigarettes that he should have had cancer 30 seconds into this film.
It's kind of funny because in Kong, it's like every 2 seconds there's some horrible dinosaur or something trying to kill people, or Kong is trying to kill people. In Godzilla, it's like, it's just these long stretches of nothing, and then Godzilla just crushing everything, and then long stretches of nothing. It's got some cool destruction moments and stuff, but whereas Kong is a lot of, look out, it's a monster, look out, it's a monster, look out, it's a monster. This one is like, look at these buildings being destroyed. This giant lizard thing really hates miniatures, and it's just, it's not this long, but it feels like segments of 15, 20 minutes, even though they're probably 3 or 4, where he's just kicking over walls and stomping on things and biting train cars and spitting them out and just spewing fire everywhere. And it's cool, but it's also a little kind of repetitive. I feel like Kong did a nicer job of keeping things moving at times. Not that it's some fast-paced, edge of your seat thrill ride, but it definitely, once the main conflict begins, once Anne is captured in Kong, it's pretty much, for the most part, action-packed from then on out. Whereas Godzilla is a little more uneven, ups and downs, and big set pieces, and then a bunch of people sitting around just like, oh, woe is me. So it doesn't have as much, it doesn't have the fun of Kong.
This is a masterpiece of film, not monster cinema, but film in general. One that should always be remembered and understood why it needs to be remembered as such a great film.
Obviously, the follow-up Godzilla movies really camped it up with dozens of cheesy monster battles, but what I like about this original version is that Godzilla is portrayed as a force of nature, like a sentient nuclear-powered hurricane. The follow-up to the original Gojira was Godzilla Raids Again, later released in the US as Gigantus the Fire Monster, which was the first of many Toho movies that pit Godzilla against another giant monster, in this case Anguirus. The first of many such kaiju battles to come, from Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah to Mechagodzilla, and even Space Godzilla. I didn't make that last one up.
But he's Godzilla's an awesome movie monster, and you can't keep a good movie monster down, because apparently even though he was disintegrated by bubbles, he's back to fight robot versions of himself and pollution monsters and Ultraman and all kinds of crazy shit. So, as a first outing goes for a movie that's, pushing 70, pretty good stuff. Could be better in some places. Obviously could be a lot worse, judging by the other movies that came out around its time.
What I actually think is an interesting comparison between Godzilla and King Kong, which you guys talked about last time, is that actually all giant monster movies stem from The Lost World, the 1925 dinosaur film made by, the special effects at least were directed by Willis O'Brien as well. It was his first feature-length film where he had worked on these techniques and was able to put them into play. And I think that movie's actually pretty darn good. There's a million different cuts of it. So I'd watch the 1 hour and 6 minute one all the time when I was a kid, even though it was a silent movie. I was like, there's dinosaurs and I'm loving it, so I'm just going to watch the silent film. A lot of people probably wouldn't have patience for that today, but that is the precursor to King Kong. And in that, and I've read the book to Lost World as well. In The Lost World, it's about these guys, going to this plateau in the middle of the Amazon rainforest that, that Professor Challenger says, there's dinosaurs there that still survive, and he has to go and he captures a pterodactyl and brings it back. But in the movie version, they capture a brontosaurus. Like they capture what do you call that kind of dinosaur? I don't know. It's been too long. I'll call it a brontosaurus. They capture a brontosaurus and they bring it to London. And then the brontosaurus gets loose and destroys parts of London before jumping off of the bridge and dying. It's interesting that how similar that is to King Kong and how similar that is to Godzilla, because in King Kong, of course, they go to the Lost World. They meet up with the giant creatures, and then they bring him back. And in Godzilla, it's only the bringing it back part. It's when the dinosaur comes onto shore and destroys the city. Now, who will win in the end between Godzilla and King Kong?
And we're gonna talk about Godzilla versus Kong.
Really, really looking forward to King Kong versus Godzilla. Or I'm sorry, Godzilla versus Kong.
I'm torn on the question of who would win in this.
This is tough. This is a tough one.
As for who's gonna win in the upcoming GVK film,
about King Kong or Godzilla winning, because at this point I've seen the original King Kong and Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Who would win in a fight between the 1933 King Kong and the original Gojira?
As with before, I still think Godzilla would whoop King Kong's ass.
Because it's an American film, so the filmmakers might put King Kong as the winner.
And I liked King Kong a lot more.
While King Kong is arguably the better movie,
again, nuclear heat breath, even the 1954 version.
But there's not a chance in hell that Godzilla will lose this fight.
I mean, the obvious winner is Godzilla.
Well, hey, you know what? I said it last week, I'm going to say it again. Movie-wise, yeah, Godzilla's got King Kong topped on so many fronts because, he's got 28 movies and endured for 60, 70 years.
King Kong versus Godzilla is the 60s version that is a lot of fun as well.
Now, when they're both creatures in suits in the 1960-something Godzilla versus King Kong that Toho produced, well, then you might have more of a fair fight. They made King Kong bigger. They're both guys in suits. It seems like they both have about the same toughness in their skin, but...
Speaking of that movie, the 60s one ends with King Kong winning, more or less, because Godzilla is just a bad guy throughout, so it makes sense that Kong is the hero.
I think what would be really cool is if they had a part 1 and a part 2, and one of them wins in part 1, the other one wins in part 2. Who knows?
It's going to be the power of teamwork.
Judging by the trailer of the new movie, it looks like they're going that route again, although my theory is that Godzilla's somehow being brainwashed by Monarch or whatever the eco-terrorist group that Charles Dance is a part of in the previous movie. So my prediction, and I don't have any inside knowledge, I haven't read any leaks or spoilers or anything, so my prediction is that Kong will be set up as the hero, but then Godzilla will ultimately win in his battle against Kong, and just before he delivers the finishing blow, the human characters will find out how to bring him back to his senses, and then Kong and Godzilla will team up against a bigger threat. Who that threat is, who knows?
because God knows they're going to release either Mechagodzilla or Mecha King Ghidorah.
Well, we'll see, but yeah, I have some theories on that I won't get into, just in case anyone wants to go in completely fresh to the experience.
And Kong's what, got a handful at best, but again, he's the underdog, man. Kong wins.
This one's no contest.
Godzilla has everything to his advantage.
Godzilla is an unstoppable force that breathes fire and can withstand shots from a tank.
Also, he shrugs off rockets, artillery, electricity. He's basically indestructible by man stuff.
Most especially nuclear annihilating flame breath, or whatever we're calling the attack now. But he should be able to just melt King Kong, right?
Gojira would absolutely crush this version of Kong.
And King Kong got taken out by a biplane.
Right?
Literally, he would just step on him.
Especially if it's the Shin Godzilla version, which I know it's not. It's a legendary version, but I saw the legendary version of Godzilla take Muto's head off, or what was it? He pried his mouth open and then shot flames into his insides. I mean, come on. King Kong really going to be able to withstand that? It's not like he has armor-plated skin, this King Kong. He's a mammal. He's just a big one.
I don't even know why they were shooting 50 caliber bullets at him. That's not even a mosquito bite.
I mean, mammals their skin is kind of weak. You know? They need to be able to expel heat from it, so I don't know.
Or knock over a building as he's climbing it.
I also know nothing about mammals. I don't even know if that was true. Either way, it doesn't seem like a fair fight. They're really going to have to stretch how King Kong could be a threat to Godzilla.
Kong wins.
Let's see what this is going to be like. It's really exciting.
Man, yeah, I could not be more excited about that movie. The trailer looks great.
I am avoiding all trailers because whoever Legendary uses to make their trailers is extremely irresponsible and just being cheeky and throwing in huge spoilers.
Kong wins.
I'm a big fan of the director, Adam Wingard. Hasn't made the best movies lately, but his first few were really solid horror movies, so yeah, I'm just incredibly excited.
King Kong's gonna lose.
I mean, come on. Godzilla's got the secret power, secret weapon, and King Kong don't.
Sorry if you don't like it.
That's just how it is.
It's a fact. Kong wins.
But, all hail the king of the monsters, man. Godzilla.
King Kong's gonna lose.
Yeah, guys, I hope you love the original Godzilla as much as I do. It's a wonderful film. Please check out my podcast called The Godzilla Podcast if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Godzilla.
And looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the podcast, along with the upcoming podcasts. I'm very excited to contribute to those as well, if possible.
As we are getting ready to go see Godzilla vs. King Kong with the Legendary Pictures treatment at $200 million,
For my full thoughts on Godzilla and its imported US version, check out episode 3 of Record All Monsters. We talk more about everything discussed above and also go over our Godzilla bona fides.
But if you have some time, check out the episode I did with Straight Chilling, episode number 278. It's a start.
So keep up the great work.
Thanks, guys.
So originally we were hoping to cover more of the original Toho Godzilla films as part of our countdown leading up to Godzilla vs. Kong. But because they pushed the release date forward 2 months, we had to kind of pick and choose which ones we were going to cover. That said, down the line, we'll probably revisit a lot of the classic kaiju films as part of a future season. But in the interest of time, for the next one, we're jumping ahead to 1998's American Godzilla remake.
Godzilla will return in 1998's Godzilla.
Starring Matthew Broderick, Ferris Bueller himself, and directed by the guy who gave us Independence Day, Roland Emmerich. That's right, this is the one with the Puff Daddy song and the Taco Bell tie-in.
Come with me.
Oh boy.
During the Jurassic period and Cretaceous period, the dinosaurs evolved into various adaptive types, many of which reached colossal size. Tyrannosaurus rex, about 70 million years ago. Its long skull was equipped with powerful jaws in which were set sharp, doubly serrated teeth. Weighing more than 4 metric tons and averaging 19 feet in height, This creature was believed to be one of the largest predators who ever lived on our planet.
Podcasters Assemble is a production of the We Can Make This Work Probably Podcast Network. Find more of our shows at probablywork.com and learn how to contribute to future episodes of Podcasters Assemble by looking us up on Twitter and Instagram at Casters Assemble or joining on Discord. The link is in the show notes. Submissions are always open. Thank you to everyone who's able to contribute to this episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to where you can find them all online. Thank you. Oh God, please, thank you.
Music produced by Deft Stroke Sound. Opening narration written by Eric Slater and performed by Justin Aki. This episode was edited by Eric Slater.
This has been a presentation of the We Can Make This Work
Probably Network.
Follow us on Twitter
at ProbablyWork for more of our questionable content.
Also, we have a website called probablywork.com.
Akihuko.
Am I using the right mic? Am I using the right microphone? I think I am. Yeah.
Akihiko.
So I realized on the actual webpage it has instructions. So you can splice this information in wherever you want.
Podcasters Assemble!